Hey everyone, welcome. I hope you liked the video. This will be an overview of my entire process from beginning to end, even into DaVinci. I will stay pretty high level throughout, so if there's anything specific you want to learn, feel free to go down into the description. I will have links to a bunch of tutorials there, and all of them will be pretty much teaching you how I created this scene. So with that, please like, subscribe, and let's get started. Okay, to start off, I'm using Unreal Engine 5.3. That's pretty important if you plan on creating what I'm creating using the same assets. So do keep that in mind. And then I'm also using a third-person template so we get our mannequin. So the first thing I'm doing here is a mock-up. I'm just using simple cubes, bringing in the mannequin, setting up the camera to get a first pass on the composition. And then I start designing our scene just using these white blocks to kind of help me build out and craft my idea. Okay, and for the assets, I use the Query collection, so you can find this on the Epic Marketplace. And the next thing I do is go through Quixel Bridge. I'm not going to go too deep into the materials and meshes that I used, but I will click on everything, so if you want names for it to download it yourself, you can. So the first thing I do is bring in all the static meshes, line it up so I can see all the assets I have available to me, and then I just build out our scene using the mockup that we just created. And then just a tip to anyone who's building an Unreal Engine, always start off with blocking out your scene. It just makes the entire process less stressful because you can block out your scene ahead of time, get a good idea of the composition you're going for, play around with a lot of different ideas before you kind of choose one and then move forward from there, which is so much easier than bringing in a ton of assets and trying to play around those assets to figure out how you want your scene to look. Okay, the next thing I do is I actually build a landscape material. The landscape material might feel a little intimidating, however, it is pretty simple, but it's basically 3 different blended materials to create the landscape, and then I also enable displacement. I'll have tutorials on the landscape material I made linked below. I'll also have a tutorial on how to enable displacement if you need that as well, linked below. Okay, now that I have my landscape material in and fully brushed in, I'm going to go over to the modeling mode, go to create, click on rectangle. If you want, you can pause and copy the settings I have here on the rectangle, and then I click accept. Next thing I'm going to go into after this is the deform section, also seen on the left. After I click deform, I'm going to click on displace, and I've kind of already skipped ahead here, so you're not going to see me do it, but if you look under options, you'll see displacement map. Make sure to add in the ARD texture. It'll be the one that's kind of like this weird greenish hue, and then switch the channel to blue. Blue is where we hold displacement information, so it's on that channel if anyone's curious why. And then the next thing I'm going to do is add the material onto our landscape to kind of see if it lines up with the displacement. And then you can play with UV scale. So the UV scale will affect the scale of the displacement, and then you can go in the material to change the scale of material. You want these to line up, because if they line up, that means the displacement material will be correct to each other. Sometimes that's always not the case. So make sure you're like checking the material, making sure it lines up perfectly. But yeah, after that, you can go to the very top and play with the displacement intensity to kind of get the look you're going for. Now, anyone who's like, we just created a landscape material with displacement, why are we doing this as well? You can build this out to be a lot more high quality than you can the actual landscape, and I feel this still looks a little more realistic. So I like having both because they kind of blend into each other really well. But in general, when it comes to getting high detail, I still prefer doing these panels first. So yeah, after we accept the displacement, the next thing I'm going to go is to deform and then lattice deform. I'm going to click on all our corners and kind of bring everything down. Later on this tutorial, you'll see me adjusting this. I kind of create a few depending on what we're working on, but basically if it's a completely flat rectangle, you'll have edges that just stick up because I've already played with the actual landscape and I know the landscape curves. So there's going to be no flat surface to really lay it on. So it helps to basically bring down the edges and corners of our rectangle once we create it. So we won't have any edges like sticking up above the ground. So yeah, now that I made those, you'll see me make a few others using other materials. But yeah, I keep building out the scene now using these little displaced cards. Okay, now you can probably tell we have one issue, which is the colors that we're using do not match at all. This is overall a pretty simple fix. The next thing I do is just enter the material instance and play with the tint. You'll notice I switch to unlit mode quite often. The reason I do this is trying to match colors in unlit mode is so much easier than trying to do it in lit mode. So I highly suggest you switch over to unlit and just play with your different materials and static meshes materials to kind of get your scene to be cohesive and one color. Now the next thing I do is head over to Sketchfab, type in pillar, and I find this pillar right here. So overall, I was just looking for a nice static mesh that I could add my own material to. And this is actually perfect. So I go over to download 3D model, copy the credits. Currently the credits are in the description below, and then download an FPX. Once the FPX is downloaded, I just unzip it, drag and drop it, and make sure I do build nanite when I import it. But other than that, just import all. In this case, again, I wasn't really worried about getting material. I just needed the pillar. But yeah, I drag and drop the pillar in and then download a new material that I can add to the pillars itself. Place the material on the pillars and we're good. Okay, so now I'm just making the final tweaks to the scene before we head over to foliage. What I'm doing here is really just slowly building out all the corners, color correcting everything, and making sure it looks fully cohesive. Okay, now that our scene is pretty much 99% there, the last real bit is just adding in foliage. I showed these assets earlier within the overview, so if you want to know what they are, you can go back and pause and download them from Quixel Bridge. But overall, it's just a bunch of desert grass, nothing too special, just adding it around onto the walls and stuff to kind of give the world a little more texture and make it look less barren. All right, now with our scene pretty much finished, we are moving on to animation. So I use this Desert Soldier from the Epic Marketplace. Once you buy it, download it, it's really easy to add to your project because you do it through the library of Epic Marketplace. And then once you bring it into your project and bring it into your scene, he's just going to be sitting in an A pose. So he's not going to have anything to animate off of. So we're going to animate him using two different methods. One of them is going to be creating a control rig and animating him via the control rig. And the other one is going to be using Mixo animations. All right, so this right here is the Mixo Converter. I'll have a link in the description so you guys can download this. But it's pretty simple to use. The first thing you want to do is go over to the right where it says main menu. And under that, click on enter the conversion process. Okay, once you enter, you're going to see a bunch of Unreal mannequins. You want to choose the mannequin that has the same skeleton as the skeletal mesh that you are using. So if you download something from Epic Marketplace, there'll usually be something in the description saying it's rigged to the Epic skeleton. That's usually UE5. Sometimes it'll say UE4. So just make sure you're using the right mannequin. In my case, I'm going to be using Manny from Unreal Engine 5. So once you click on it, it's going to bring you to a folder that has the skeletal mesh for Manny and Manny Simple. So once you have that, go to Miximo, and then you can click Upload Character, and then I'm going to just use the Manny Simple FBX. So load that up into Miximo, and then after a short while, you should see the skeletal mesh inside the website. So now that it's in there, you can kind of browse any of the animations. I'm not going to show the animation I'm using, but I will just pick maybe some little dance moves since I'm just teaching you how to use this. Okay, this is a cool dance move. So on the right, you'll see focus, stance, overdrive, character arm space. You can play with these things to make sure you're not getting any clipping or everything's looking good with the actual animation. But once you feel good with everything, go over and click download. All right, once you hit download, make sure it is without skin, and for under keyframe reduction, make it uniform, and then click download. Make sure you download it into the incoming FBX folder within the Mixo Converter. It'll be saved along next to the actual Mixo Converter software. So make sure it goes into that folder because that folder is what the Mixo Converter is going to basically take from. Okay, so back inside the converter, if you scroll all the way down, you're going to see convert the animations, and you'll see the animation you just downloaded because right now it's grabbing from that folder. All you have to do is click on, actually go to the bottom. I click on this by accident. Go to the bottom where the little girl is running and do click to convert the animations. And then you'll see the animation pop up on the right under animations converted. So if you want to access that file quickly, you can just click open the folder. In my case, I kind of save it somewhere else. And then also if you scroll down, it'll show you the parameters that you need to basically import it into your scene. So go back to your outgoing FBX, drag and drop it into your content browser, and then you're going to see this panel pop up. Change the first one to, or skeleton to SK mannequin. And then you can kind of copy all the different settings I do here. The Mixo Converter kind of tells you what to do, but if you copy the settings I use, this tends to always work for me. In this case, from what you see here, the only thing I'm going to undo is the add curve metadata, but everything else, how I see it right now, is how I want it. Okay, so now that my animation is imported, I open up a camera sequencer and just bring in the mannequin. This isn't a necessary step. I just kind of want to show you the retargeting effect from the mannequin over to our desert soldier. So first one is the desert soldier added to the sequencer, and then I add in the mannequin. That way we can now see both animations. So just clicking on the plus sign next to animation, I'm going to scroll down and find the animation we just imported. Usually they end up popping up at the bottom. And then if I click play, you'll see her not dancing because we have a control rig in effect. So once I delete that, you'll now see her dancing. Cool. So now the idea is we want to retarget this animation over to our desert skeleton or desert soldier. Okay, so now let's open up the content browser. Type in RTG in the search bar, and then there's 3 different options here. I'm going to use the RTG to mannequin because that's usually UE5 to UE5. So at the top right, you're going to see source, which is our mannequin, and then target, you're going to see the desert soldier. If you don't have a desert soldier, click down on preview mesh and change that to your preview mesh. Also make sure that the skeleton you're doing is correct. Once that's done, on the bottom right, you're going to see a large list of animations, and at the very bottom is our animation. So I'm just going to double click on it, and now you're going to see in real time the retarget from our UE5 mannequin over to our desert soldier. So if you want it, all you have to do is go to the top, click export, export the animation. Now when I go back to our camera sequencer, I can click on our desert soldier, click on animation. All the way at the bottom, you're going to see our animation. I can add it, and if I click play, voila, they are now dancing. So this is what I use to set up our animation, half using Mixo, and then I also create a control rig. So now we can hop over to how I created the control rig. All right, so earlier I mentioned how I upgrade this project from 5.3 to 5.4, and this is the moment I do it. So I realized after I created the project in 5.3 that I wanted to create a control rig for this character, and to do it in 5.3 is very difficult. To do it in 5.4 is very easy. But then the other issue was this asset pack only existed in, or was only allowed for 5.3 projects, which is the query asset pack. So in this scenario, all I did was I launched Unreal Engine 5.4 and then opened this project in 5.4, and luckily everything migrated pretty smoothly. So now we are working in Unreal Engine 5.4. So I'm gonna open up the content browser, right click, go down control rig, and then do control rig. After that, I'm gonna go down to modular rig and click create. So when you open up the control rig, it's gonna look something like this. And if you go up to the top right to preview scene, click on that, and then I just go down and add the Desert Soldier into the preview mesh. And then now you're gonna see a little circle around his stomach. This is pretty much where our rig is going to start. So if you look to the left, you're gonna see a bunch of different module assets. And if you hover over this initial node, you're gonna see it says spine socket. So what you wanna do is go to the left, drag the spine module asset, and drop it into the socket. Once you do that, you're gonna see a bunch of new sockets pop up. And if you hover over these, they're each gonna be named. So the bottom two near the legs are gonna be asking for legs modules. And then the top three are gonna be arm and I believe neck modules. But if you hover over them, this socket will tell you which module asset it accepts. So now what I'm gonna be doing is just dragging the legs over into the leg sockets. And then I'm gonna be naming the legs left versus right. So when I'm in the control rig, it's very clear. Now I just continue the same process with the shoulder, and then the arms, and then the hands and fingers. Again, I make sure to label everything on the left side of the body with an L, and then everything on the right side of the body with an R. Awesome. So now that I'm done adding all the sockets, I just take one of the arms for a little test run, and yeah, we're good to go. We now have a control rig. So now that we have everything together to jump into animation, I now move over to camera sequencer. So I split this one up between 4 main shots. The first one is going to be the one of the feet. The next one is going to be of the character looking left and right. The third is the POV of the character looking around. And then the fourth is our scene, our ending scene, our hero shot with the character walking towards our monument. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on how I animate all this because it is actually very simple at the end of the day. However, I do have a tutorial on the camera sequencer linked below. So if you do want to learn how I did all this, I definitely suggest you check that out because everything I teach in that is what I would employ to create a scene like this. Okay, and now the final touch is the Niagara system. So I'm not going to dive too deep in how I created this. However, I will have a link below to a tutorial which will explain how I created this step by step. However, I will leave the sped up version here for you to watch in case you already understand Niagara system and just kind of want a quick overview of how I did what I did. All right, now with all the final touches added in, the last step here is rendering. The one thing you need to know about Niagara systems is they start basically on the very first frame. So if you don't actually keyframe them into your scene, most of the time they'll be just starting as the scene is starting, which is a little weird. So what you have to add here is a system lifecycle, change the drop-down menu to desired age, make sure to push that all the way back, which means it'll start before the first frame. So once the scene starts, the Niagara system's already in full-blown effect. But yeah, I basically copy paste this keyframe in and export my video. All right, and now the last stop is DaVinci Resolve. So this is where I put everything together, edit it, add the sound, add any effects, change anything about the video, and basically create the full edit. I'm not going to teach too much about DaVinci, nor do I honestly have tutorials on it, but there are plenty you can find on YouTube. So yeah, I definitely suggest DaVinci for anyone who's beginning because it is a very intuitive software that's very powerful considering that it's also free. But skipping ahead here into the fun part in DaVinci, it is the color. So I mainly play with the contrast, saturation, shadow, highlights, really the basic stuff in the first 3 nodes. But you'll see later on, because I'll just play this entire thing out, that I do add halation, glow, and I even believe some film grain to the scene, because you kind of want to destroy a digital image since a digital image looks so clean to begin with. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, subscribe. It helps a lot. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one.